The last 48 hours have been absolutely insane. Bungie finally gave us another ARG, which I cannot express how thankful I am for enough. This was amazing. It's been like 5 years since Season of the Dawn when we got our last ARG or community puzzle, which was the Corridors of Time, at least anything on this sort of scale. This was absolutely massive. It was an incredible undertaking by a large part of the community, and I want to do it justice and kind of recap it real quickly for those of you who want to revisit it in the future, or maybe missed the puzzle and want to see how it was solved, or you just want a kind of nice little recap. So that's what we're going to do here. It was kind of over the course of like a week and a half, but really primarily took place over about 48 hours. So we're going to talk about all the different steps. I'm going to try to give credit where it is due, but like really the thing that matters, when we were kind of putting together the tools and the workflow to work on this, I was very adamant, and a lot of us were very adamant, that there needed to be as much community involvement as possible. Previous ARGs have kind of ran into the problem where it was just a few people in like a little VC hoarding all the data, and there wasn't a lot of interplay. So it was really important to me that as much of the community could participate as possible, and I hope we did a good job there. And I hope that if you wanted to participate, you were able to. That's something that's really important to me. I think these puzzles work a lot better when, you know, everyone can participate if you wish. So the rewards for this were the Enigmatology emblem, the de-interlace ship here, which is absolutely sick, and the Umbral Rumble Taken-ish shader. Absolutely beautiful shader. And also when you completed this, you got access to a cutscene that kind of sets up like Rites of the Nine or the Edge of Fate, which is the new DLC coming probably sometime in July. So really just cram-packed, reward-filled puzzle that was really fun. How did this begin? So on, I believe it was April 22nd, a Tuesday, there were chess pieces that started to appear all around Destiny. There were 60 of these chess pieces. Some of them you got by like killing certain enemies or going to certain locations or that sort of thing. However, when people collected all 60 of them, there were triumphs, and that was just it. Like, nothing else happened for that week. However, this Tuesday, April 29th, when reset hit, if you came over to Eris's apartment, you went into Eris's throne world, and instead of talking to Eris, if you drop down behind here, there's a secret room. And if you had the chess pieces, you could interact with this chessboard. Or you might have been able to interact even if you didn't have the pieces, but you needed the pieces to do the next part of the puzzle. So you interacted with this chessboard, and it pulled you into a unique space. So that would spawn you into a new location, which is really sick, just a giant chessboard called the Unknown Space or the Unknown Antechamber if you access it from the Helm map. This is pretty cool, and what was quickly discovered is that there were a series of logic puzzles where you could add or remove different chess pieces from the board or change them from black to white in order to set up a check, an absolute pin on your opponent, the black pieces, while protecting your own king from being in check. So there were 27 of these puzzles, and the really interesting thing is that you only got a certain amount of every piece. So this is conversion, so if there was a black piece on the board, I could take the black piece and make it a white piece. I could add a certain number of bishops, a certain number of queens, a certain number of pawns, a certain number of rooks, a certain number of knights, or I could just flat out delete any black pieces that were not the black king. And so this was a series of 27 logic puzzles that you had to complete with a certain number of moves. So for all 27 puzzles, you only get 16 pawns, as you can see there in the buff. For all 27 puzzles, you only got 2 queens. So it was kind of a race to find out how you solve all 27 of these within the limit of the 60 pieces that you essentially found in the previous step. So for instance, in this puzzle here, you can see I have a king at D1. It is perfectly safe, so I don't have to worry about protecting it. But I have a queen also here at D7, and the enemy king is at D8. So I need to put this in check. The queen has it protected, but if the king takes the queen, then it's safe. It is no longer in check. So if you take a pawn and you support or protect the queen, now that king is an absolute checkmate. It's an absolute pin, and you'll move on to the second puzzle. There are 27 of these. I'm not going to go over all of the solutions here. I have a separate video, which I'll link down below, which goes over all of those. I believe the first person to solve all 27 of those was Saltagreppo. I didn't know this. That guy freaking loves chess, and he's really good at it. Who would have known? So that was pretty cool. Once you do all of that, however, that's when the real community puzzle began. So when you completed the 27th and final puzzle, all the pieces would despawn. It would say a new game begins or something like that. And then all the pieces would go back, like all the icons would go back to normal, except for the take icon, which would disappear, and there's this goblet instead. And when you walk up to it and hold activate, it says the water reveals, and it'll pull you into a very unique cutscene. And so what was discovered is that these were unique puzzle pieces. I'm going to go ahead and take a screenshot of that for demonstrational purposes here in a little bit. But also, if you pay attention to my buffs, you can see it says signal frequency 525. I'll do it one more time here. And what was discovered is that that signal frequency, so 525, it changes for everyone, corresponds to these different puzzle pieces, and that there were 4,096 unique puzzle pieces that we had to collect, properly transcribe, and those were the pieces to the larger puzzle. So obviously a huge undertaking, and that's really where the community puzzle aspect of this began. This is very similar to Corridors of Time. It became pretty apparent to us early on that this was going to work under a similar workflow. So if I open up that screenshot I just took in this editing software, you can see that along the borders of this puzzle piece are unique chess pieces, either black or white, and it can be any of the different pieces that you would find on a chessboard. The theory very early on, because of Corridors of Time, was that these sides would correspond to another puzzle piece that had the same icons, and then you would click them together like puzzle pieces. That is essentially exactly how Corridors of Time worked. And whenever you put all the pieces together, we thought it would make something, a picture, something to solve, that sort of thing. There were a couple other things we started noticing. The center of the square could be different colors. It could be either dark red, like it is here, light red, dark gray, or light gray. And then the very center tiles here, the 2x2 in the center, could sometimes have chess pieces in it. And then the kind of 4x4 square in the center could also, in addition, sometimes be black and white. And that's the only spaces that would be pure black and pure white. And so what we did very early on, we created a Google submission form. People could submit all their puzzle pieces. And then the absolute goat of this ARG, TJ, helped design a manual transcription and submission form. So what you could do using TJ's site is actually build all of your separate puzzle pieces that you could get and then submit them so we could tabulate them all and start matching them. This was the bulk of this puzzle. One thing I do want to note is the pieces were very interesting because everyone had like semi-unique pieces. Like obviously there's only 4,096 pieces, so there's going to be some duplicates, but every character had a unique one. So if I switch over to my Titan, it'd have a different one. Switch over to my Hunter, I'd have a different one. And they reset at the 50-minute mark every hour. So every person that was involved in this ARG had up to 3 pieces per hour, which was pretty cool. So the next part of this was actually transcribing. So I'm going to go ahead as an example and transcribe the puzzle piece that I just got. But for your reference here, as I mentioned, they could have different center colors here, dark gray, light red, dark red. They could have what we called the QR codes in the center, which was a very early guess based off the black and white pixels, but it ended up actually being right. And I'll talk about that here in a second. And then sometimes the different pieces would have chess pieces in the center, and then it'd always be the same one. So for instance here, you can see that this is a white queen in the center of this piece. That is also very important. So all of that has to be properly filled out, and I'm going to go ahead and do my board here. I'll probably speed through some of this, but for instance, I had dark red in the center, and then I just you have to accurately fill out the entire border. So like I had a black queen, a white rook. I'm going to go ahead and fill this all out. Give me 1 second. So as you can see here, I have fully transcribed that piece that I just got in game. I have all of the correct chess pieces in their correct colors here around the borders. That's going to allow us to click the different puzzle pieces together. My center color is correct. My signal frequency is correct. We were asking people to submit an image URL as well for verification. But essentially, this site and the many different versions of this site and everything this data fed to went through a couple of iterations. And so TJ, did start like all of the main sites and made most of them, I think. But there were a group of individuals, TJ, Nblock, New Lemons, Danzy, Mossy, Magic Twins, and Hex Cody, that all helped this web design in some way. Some of them made their own websites that manipulated unique data or helped gather these squares or helped verify the squares or all of these different things. A lot of people were involved in this ARG. My communities, Mr. Raffle Waffle, Milo's communities, Evan, CB Gray, Bog, ATP, Dado, Sneak, I Have Toes. Like, so many people and their communities were involved. But I cannot stress enough that without these 7 individuals, this ARG does not get completed. So I really just want to say, like, TJ especially, there was a lot of requests and a lot of, hey, we need to make a tool that does this, where the community can get involved like this. No one knows how to do it except for you. I'm so sorry. Do your best. And I just have to say, TJ and all of these individuals absolutely killed it. It is insane going through an ARG and watching a website spawn in a couple of hours that does exactly what you needed it to do flawlessly the first time, with thousands and thousands and thousands of people all simultaneously using the site and collecting data accurately and being able to verify that data. It was like truly magnificent. It was just something that was spectacular, and I cannot thank these individuals enough for their contributions. If I miss anyone, I am so sorry. If I, find out I miss anyone, I will update the pinned comment with your names. And if I get any of the steps slightly wrong or forget anything, I will also update the pinned comment with that information as well. But the entire community killed it. We were getting so many submissions. This went on for 30 hours or so, where we're just collecting all of these submissions. And eventually what we started to realize is that's spoilers, ignore that. All of the pieces with the QR codes that we were calling them, the white and black pixels, they actually fit directly together. And so we made this grid, we kind of manually put them all together. And then Hex Cody did a great job translating the inside QR code bit into white and black pixels. And then we fit them all together like this, and it made a readable QR code, which is just absolutely insane. And just to get an idea, there are 4,096 pieces. This used like a quarter of them. Spoilers, this is what the final puzzle piece ends up looking like. The QR code is literally this 2x2 square in the center. So we were using like barely any of the data, and we were able to get this QR code, which was really cool. So when you scan this QR code, it gives you this here, which is a Fen string. It's essentially just chess nomenclature that tells you the current setup of a board, which is pretty cool. But then it also gave us this URL, aion-archives.net. And so if you go there, Bungie designed a tool for this ARG, which is crazy. Of course, there are all sorts of Easter eggs here. For instance, if you enter 7 sevens, it gives you like unique lore and deep throwbacks to Bungie and that sort of thing. All sorts of fun little Easter eggs. I'm sure we'll be discovering stuff on this site for a very long time. This was very interesting because we could use it to verify puzzle pieces. So for instance, that puzzle piece that I just put in here, whenever you set up this puzzle piece, it spits out one of those Fen numbers that I mentioned before, which is essentially kind of the chess nomenclature of your board. And this Fen would directly correspond to the signal frequency, or like the ID or the number of your board. So the picture I got in game is board 525. And if I come over to this AION site and I enter 525, it'll ask me then for an experiment code, which we found out was the Fen number. And when you paste that, one of really two things will happen. There's a couple of things that can happen, but it'll either say, yes, this is correct, or no, this is not. If you got it wrong, that means you transcribed the board incorrectly. And if it's correct, that means that you have, properly tabulated the representation of that puzzle piece. So I'm going to click it, and you can see I got green text, which we found out means that, yes, my tabulation was correct, and we definitively have this puzzle piece, it's good to go. This kind of unfolded in a series of ways. This is definitely like I'm being concise here. But this helped us verify whether the submissions from you all were right or not. But let's say I actually transcribed it wrong. Like maybe I switched one of the pieces. I made it a black instead of a white or whatever. What happens then is when you paste your fen code, it'll give you a different output here. So instead of green showing you you're correct, it'll give you blue, and it'll give you one of a couple errors. But essentially, if you see purple here or a couple other things, it means that your input was incorrect, and we know that we have to go and then fix this in order to have the correct puzzle piece. So it was very nice of Bungie to give us a verification tool here. That was really cool. So essentially, a lot of the middle of this puzzle became, okay, how do we effectively collect these puzzle pieces? And then how do we effectively validate them? And there was a couple different approaches to this, but eventually we opened it up to the entire community, where we built this tool. I say we, TJ built this tool where everyone in all of our chats could go to this and they would get a signal frequency and a fen code. And so you could copy the fen code, you'd get the signal frequency, you would come over, 3083 was the number I got, I would go, I would enter the fen code, and you can see it's green, so it's correct. So I would go back and I would hit correct. And so we had 10,000 people doing this for all of these puzzle pieces over and over and over again. And using all of this, congregated data, we were able to be like, okay, these 50 pieces are probably wrong because most people are saying they're incorrect, while these 4,000 pieces, they look like they're good to go. And we were able to crowdsource all of that verification very fast. And once we made this public and got the community involved, it went like that. It was crazy. So we were able to correct all of the incorrect pieces and start putting it together. Now, there was an amazing tool that was made. I think Danzy did this, I believe. There were a couple different versions of this, so I apologize. But essentially, it would automatically go and take all your pieces that were correct and start piecing them together. And you can see, got a little crazy. 4,096 different pieces. It's broken here in the center. You can ignore that. Equals about 64 by 64, or exactly 64 by 64. And what we found when we grouped them by their different colors, so reds with dark red and light red together, alternating like a chessboard, dark gray, light gray, alternating together like a chessboard, is you were making 64 individual chessboards. And we have a simplified view here. If the puzzle piece had the chess pieces in the center, as we discussed, that was indicative of that piece actually being there on the chessboard. And so we have a very simplified view here. And essentially, what was found out is you had to determine if you could make a check position of these boards by converting a single black piece to a single white piece. Now, we had a hint about this. So in the Ion network here, if you entered 10/17/1956, which was October 17, 1956. It is the date of probably the most famous chess match of all time. It would appear between Donald Byrne, sorry, probably just made some people mad there, and Robert Fischer. It's commonly called Game of the Century. Essentially gave us this hint. It pointed out a pawn, a bishop, and a knight at certain positions, and I believe it was someone in Mr. Awful or Milo's chat that determined this, but this was a hint that the QR code spaces could be solved using these pieces. There's also another one, this hint here, only some appear to have solutions. This ended up meaning that not all of the 64 chessboards would have a solution. So that's a little confusing. I'm gonna walk you through here. So we're gonna look at D5, which is the top left of the QR code here. If you only look at these gray spaces, you can see all of these different, let me grab a pencil with a usable color here. You can see all of these different pieces. This is the king that we have to put into checkmate here. And you can see that this king, the black king, is already in check from our bishop at B2. But this pawn can move into this space and block that check. You might think that this knight can move here as well, but we have a rook, so this is protected. So the only way that this player here can protect themselves is by moving this pawn here. So if we convert this pawn to white, that means we have an unconditional checkmate or an absolute pin, and then we win that board. So the middle left board solution is going to be a pawn. I'll do one more for you. The bottom left here, you have the king down here. If the king moves here, it's taken by our queen. If the king moves here, it's taken by our queen. If the king moves here, it's taken by our queen. However, if the king takes our queen, it is safe. So if we need a way to protect this queen, and we can do that by taking this knight here. We turn this black knight into a white knight, and that protects the queen, which means we have, once again, a checkmate or an absolute pin on this king, meaning that the solution for this was the knight. For an example of one of the boards that does not have a solution, we'll look at the bottom right one of the QR code, which will end up being board E4. This is the knight that we need to put into checkmate here. And this one's a little complex, so I'll try to explain it the best that I can. Currently, this this king is not in check. So there's a couple of things we could try to do to put it in check. We could take this pawn, but if we take this pawn, then the king can just take it and it's safe. If we take this rook, then this knight will just take it and then the king is safe. If we take this rook, the queen will take it and then the king is safe. And so essentially there is no singular black piece you can take on this board and convert to a white piece to put this king in a checkmate. So that means that in the center board, there is no solution. And so someone in Milo's chat tried this out in game. And what I mean by that is in that, for instance, I believe it was D5 square, as we went over, the pawn ended up being the answer. And so if you put a pawn in D5, then in D4, it was a knight. Remember, E4 had no solution, so we're going to leave that one blank. And then E5 ended up being a bishop. And when those were put into the correct spaces like that, that happened. And you can no longer remove these pieces from the board. They were stuck. And so this was Bungie's way of saying, hint, hint, you're doing things correctly, which was really nice of them. That definitely helped. And so we knew essentially how to do the larger solution and what we were looking for. The big problem that we started running into was data integrity. Were different things entered correctly and that sort of thing. And so a large part of the puzzle ended up just being, hey, everyone go validate pieces so we can fix them and make these chessboards as accurate as possible. So we have the correct pieces in the correct colors in the correct order. And then we can work on solving all of these different miniature chess games, converting a single black piece to a single white piece to put the king in check and then enter that solution. And we were getting very close to all of them. Milo ended up brute forcing the last couple of pieces, I believe, and then it was totally solved. So Mr. Awful Waffles did get the very first solve. I think him and Salt worked together to try to logic out the remaining chessboards that weren't entirely correct. But this ended up being the entire solution. So I'm going to enter that real quick. And so when you solved all 64 of those puzzles and you put the piece that you could swap if there was one onto the board, and if there wasn't one, you just left it blank, this ended up being the final answer. And when you have that, you walk up to this terminal right here, you hold offer your answer, and if done correctly, that will happen. The board will be verified, the answer is confirmed, this chest will spawn, which you can go up to get all of your rewards. The text chat will say the pieces between the are the words between the lines, and now you begin to see the page, and then you can walk up to this and get your final cutscene. That is the final part of this ARG. It was super incredible. I know I condensed it down here, but it was a journey over 48 hours. Me and others spent a ton of time streaming and validating data and entering data and organizing, and the community really came through. And like I said, the web developers team, like, they're freaking wizards. I don't even understand it. So congratulations to the community. I think this was, out of all the ARGs that I've been a part of within Destiny, I think this is the one that had the most widespread community involvement, and I think we should be really proud of that. I think it was awesome, and it was a lot of fun, and I hope we get more in the more, like, you know, not in 5 years, like soon-ish, you know, maybe like once a year. My sleep schedule needs time to readjust. But if you guys have any questions that I forgot to answer, please leave them down below. Thank you all so much if you were part of this, and thank you for watching. If you're interested in more endgame and puzzle, Destiny, and marathon content, make sure to subscribe. Thank you guys so much, and have a fantastic day.